Nerdchachos, how's it going? So welcome to episode 2 of our Let's Play series of Planet Zoo, and we're building a zoo called Roars and Claws. And in the last episode, this is what we managed to build. We managed to build our plaza area and our entrance area that sits next door to the car park, and we've gone for a very modern feel. We've gone for this as if the zoo is brand new, as if it's just been built, rather than it being an existing zoo. And so we did all the work on the entrance area along the back here. We did the area for the toilets, and we also did this information education type ticket hub area, and a little bit of a plaza area at the front here just to bring it to life and just to bring it into some kind of use. So I'm still using the franchise map that I did before, and it seems to be working. Although in fairness, it's working probably a little bit too well, and I may as well just be in sandbox. But I wanted to use franchise just to make sure that the zoo I'm building is viable as a business, so that we know that we're not just building with no limits and we can just forget animal welfare, forget money, forget everything. I wanted to make sure that it actually could stand up in the real life world. So in this episode, I think what we're going to focus on is the staff area behind us here, and we're going to start looking at some shops that we're going to be placing near our entrance, which then will lead us into the actual shape of the zoo that we're going for. So I still want to go into this route of going down to a reflection pool, and I still want to have the tortoises and everything here, but I just need to figure out where everything's going to go first. So I definitely want a gift shop on this side, and I want the food shop on this side. And that then means that we can start moving these facilities out of the way, and we can start tidying this up and moving our animals into our actual zoo and bringing the plaza area into life. So that's going to be my main focus, and I've been doing some research on backstage areas of zoos as well. And so I think we're going to need to have some kind of administration area. So we're going to need to build some kind of area for offices. We'll also need some warehouses, and we're going to need some things to put all of these in. But a backstage area for a zoo would typically not service the entire zoo, unlike a theme park where you tend to find most of your maintenance areas in one place. For zoos, you tend not to find that because they have to have areas close to the habitat so they can move animals around and they can deal with animals and any injuries, any sickness, and so on, without having to trace them all through the zoo. So backstage areas for zoos will look very different to Planet Coaster. So we're going to see how this is going to pan out. So I think that's it for the intro. I think the next update will be coming soon. And so I think the next update is going to be our progress so far. So I'll see you on the flip side. All right, here we are about an hour and a half later, and we have ourselves a very rough backstage layout. So I've done quite a lot of research into what would be in a backstage area. And like I say, I want to make this more a facsimile of a backstage area rather than ridiculously realistic, because I think the focus needs to be on where the game plays rather than on the realism of the things that you wouldn't necessarily see as a player. But I definitely want to include the backstage areas to make sure that we've got some element of realism going on with the zoo and the layout and everything. So this is what I've done so far. And the buildings, they're only placed just in areas at the moment. They're not actually probably going to be where they sit, and they might not even be the shape that they are. But I wanted to avoid this idea of just having very flat buildings, very flat roofs. I wanted there to be a little bit of variation, but they also had to be some kind of real as well. So like you've got all of your slanted roofs, and you've got some flat roofs, and you've got different sized buildings, different shapes of buildings, and they would all do different things. And I've also started to lay out some stuff up in the actual zoo area as well. So this area here is going to be a restaurant, and I want that looking down onto the reflection pool and having a bit of a seating area out the front. And so that will continue this modern theme that we've got in the entrance area. And then I was thinking about how I was going to hide the backstage area from the rest of the zoo, whilst also maintaining this idea of continuing the zoo. And I thought, well, perhaps they would have some kind of conservation thing here, or a garden, or something that would be a building that would hide the backstage area behind, but would also be connected to the backstage area. So this might be your rare exotic animals, or this, I don't know what this is going to be yet, but I know it's definitely going to be a feature. And I quite liked the idea as well of bringing the zoo, or starting to bring the zoo back down to the street level that we've got outside. So reusing the idea of the steps that come down and having a bit of a little plaza area into this really small habitat type area, exhibit area, just to bring people away from everything else, just to sort of break away. Then there's also this area here. So reading some of the research, some of the zoos will grow their own food, and some of the zoos will have areas for plants, especially if they've got botanical gardens or anything like that. They would have an area to maintain and look after their plants. So I've just placed this as a placeholder for now, and just to sort of give an idea that this would be some sort of a greenhouse type area, and then this would be some kind of like growing area where you'd see rows of plants and things, but it would be typically covered by either a mesh or some kind of plastic or something to keep it away from the elements, depending on what they're growing. So I sort of wanted to represent that in some way. And then over here I've got some pens where you would typically find things like vets, so I'll put a vet surgery in here, and like I say, I'm not going to make this look real. I've seen other YouTubers do it, and they do such a great job, and I don't think I could even begin. So I'll make this look a little bit more like it should, but ultimately it's just going to be this representation of a pen that's going to be there. And the idea is that any animals that are in sort of this lower part of the zoo, or any immediate animals that need attention, could come in and they could sort of herd them into these pens, do what they needed to do. You can transport them out of the zoo safely if you needed to. So that's the idea of this bit here. Then you've got this area here that would be more your maintenance type area. This would be where you'd keep your diggers, and you'd maintain parts of rides that you might have and things like that. So that's sort of there as well. And you might also house food and like animal food and everything in these areas. Then you've got some more like technically servicey type areas. This would be where you would have your maintenance on your vehicles and everything that happens there, and then just a small storage shed at the very front of this area, just so it's there. It fills the space. And I wanted this idea of having car parks and a bit of concrete space, but also I also want to keep some green space as well. It can't just be one great big concrete pad. It has to have a bit of a personality. So that's something that I've started to plan out here, where I want things like car parks to go, and things like roads and where they're going to go, and have loading bays and things. So that's going to be what's the focus of the next one. And then the last thing is this area here. So I removed the gate that was here, and I kind of figured that the administration building would be a bit more dressed up. It would have a bit more personality to it. It would look a bit friendlier. You'd have a staff car park outside of the front here, and you'd be able to access it from the road this way. It's still hidden from the plaza, so you still can't see it from the plaza, but you can see it from the road, and it's very obviously there. So that's where I'm sort of thinking at the moment with this area. So we're going to see how this is going to go on. Like I say, I think I might move around some buildings, and I might have a play around with some of the aesthetics, but that's ultimately where we're at the moment. The backstage area is going to live here, and it's going to back onto the main zoo area, but we're going to have some more things hiding it along the way. So that's the end of this update, so I'll see you on the flip side. Alright, so here we are with the next update, and it's a couple of hours later, and the maintenance areas are starting to get a little bit of a personality, and I've done quite a bit of work on this back end area of the maintenance side. I wanted to know where the actual maintenance area was going to finish, so that I knew what I had to do in between. And so I've done some work on these two warehouses here. The first warehouse is just a warehouse. There's nothing spectacular about it. It's empty inside. It's just all on the outside, and I've taken inspiration from this from a recycle centre, which sounds really strange, but a recycle centre that's up the road from me, and they use absolutely massive warehouses that are just like this. And it's difficult when you're trying to detail an area like this, because you don't want it to be bland and boring, but you don't want it to be repetitive, and you don't want it to be overkill. And when you look at them in real life, they are just metal sheds. There's nothing on the walls, there's nothing on the floor, there's nothing in front, there's nothing on the ceilings. They're just sheds. And they don't have much to show for it. So this is the kind of feel that I'm going for here. I'm trying to keep it as minimal as I can, but as real as I can. And so that's why these are just these metal walls with with metal roofs, a few aircon units, and the lights along the side. Because it's what happens is inside the building, so that's where all the detail would be. That's where all the action would be. And as I said before, I wanted this to be more of a facsimile of a maintenance area. So I wanted it to be believable as a maintenance area, but not waste too much time and effort and part count on this area because it's not really in use. I mean, I'm putting staff buildings into some of these buildings, so they are usable, but they're not really going to be usable, if that makes any sense. And so I've done all of this work on here just to give the front a little bit of a look, and I just need to do some work on maybe the ceilings and add in some solar panels and things, but that's how that's sitting at the moment. And then I've also done quite a bit of work on this almost a vet area. And so the idea of this area is that the animals would be kept here if they're sick, or if they need transporting, or if they're new to the zoo and need adjusting to climates and acclimatizing to the zoo. And so that's what I've done here. I've just, again, it's this very blank wall, and that's all they are. They're just blank concrete walls. There's nothing special to them. The face down lighting will light the area around the car park and around the yard. And I've just added some clutter along here. So just a few food things, a couple of items that I've found from the workshop and whatever. So like the crates. And then just a few like bits of clutter around here. I think I want to clutter it up a bit more, but I don't want it to be messy. I think there would be like bins and stuff somewhere, but I don't know where. But in order to make this area a little bit more believable, and because it's close to where the zoo is actually going to be, I've added some of the staff facilities inside it. So like there's a vet area here, and there's two small staff rooms side by side here. And it just makes that area a bit more believable, because from this point of view, where you're looking in, you can actually see that they're functioning rooms. But on the inside, like I say, I've done no decorating. It's just, boom, there you go. It's nothing very inspiring from the inside. But what I've done on the other side is also fitted out the pens, because they are exposed. They are going to be viewable. But like I say, I don't want to waste time and effort in doing much to them. I just want them to be believable. And so when I was reading up on these pens, it's very apparent that they try and split the keeper from the animal, because you would keep all sorts of animals in here, right? You would keep all sorts of dangerous animals. You might keep a couple of not so dangerous animals, or climbers, or whatever. And so these aren't meant to be their homes. They aren't meant to be their habitats. They're not supposed to be dressed out and kitted out. They're just there for either quarantine, or they're there just for penning in purposes. And so you don't put much effort into them. They are just concrete boxes with the minimum facilities that you need. They might swap this out for maybe a meat one, or a different tree. If you've got like, I don't think we would put giraffes in here, but if you had giraffes, you'd have a tree instead. But you don't have vegetation, you don't have climbing, you don't have anything like that. They are just there. And if you did need something like that, you would move them in as and when you needed them. So for now, these aren't used. These aren't going to be anything special. And then you try and keep the animals separate from the keeper. So you have this almost fenced off area, and there would be a gate here somewhere that the keeper could come in, do what they needed to do here, and then the animals might not be in the pen, and they would then come into the pen, clean it, put the food in, etc., etc. But then they can come back and they can check on the animals and still be fenced away and not be in any danger. But obviously you would need access for both, so you need access for the keeper and access for the lorries. And what I've tried to do is I've lined up. Oh, that's really bright. I've lined up the doors from the two pens with the main door at the flare. So I've lined up the two doors with the main door at the front of the building, and likewise I've done the same here. I'm just gonna change this to daytime. One sec. There we go. So these two doors here, they line up to the doors at the front. There we go. And then likewise the other side. So you've got two doors side by side. And then you've got the main door there. So you've got the access for two pens that are completely separate to each other. But you've also got what you'd almost have is in the middle here, it would be joined in some capacity, probably by some kind of sluice system where you can keep them separate, or you can make them one if you need to. And so that's where we're at with the actual maintenance area. So I might do some more detailing, but I might just leave it like that. It kind of looks believable enough that way, that it's just simple enough. And then over this side, I started to do some of the maintenance buildings and the admin buildings. So again, I've made these facilities actually function. But again, this is just going to be a metal building. It's just thrown up. It's just there for the sake of it being there. But it's next door to the car parks, and this is sort of would almost be an extension of the admin building that's the other side. So this the admin building that's behind here, but it is behind the it's behind the fence. It's behind the gate, and you've got some parking here. And I kind of figured that they would make some kind of an effort to make it a little bit prettier. They would make an effort to make it a little bit more nature, and they'd put some trees and stuff in. But it wouldn't be highly landscaped. It wouldn't necessarily be very expensive to maintain. It's just there because it's still a staff area. Like, staff are still going to want to enjoy where they're going to be going to work. And then that's going to back onto the admin office here. And so that's where we're sitting at the moment, and it's coming together quite nicely, actually. Better than I thought. So I think my next port of call is just going to be finishing off these buildings here and starting to do the admin building and how that's going to fit into this greenhouse type area, and see where that takes us. So I'll see you on the flip side. Alright, so here we are a little bit further on, and we have ourselves an administration building that I think I got a little bit carried away with. And I think this admin building is probably a bit overkill for the zoo that we're going to be running, but it sort of felt like it needed to be this kind of size because of the look that I was wanting to go for. So here we have an administration building, and I'm not going to do anything in the middle. I could put desks and whatever in, but again, it's just there because it's there, and it needs to be there. So this is the more administration area. This is where you're going to find your departments like HR and IT and facilities and everybody. These are your extra staff that would typically work within the zoo. And I wanted to keep the theme of the modern nature that we've got running through. And particularly because it is visible to the public, so you want it to be looking quite good, but also kept quite minimal. So the backside, for example, that would just be kept as it is. I mean, it's not going to be anything special round on the back. But on the front, you want to put a little bit of effort in. It needs to look good. It needs to fit with the zoo's theme, particularly as if you're having a staff unit that's working for you, they all need to buy into the zoo's proposition, right? They need to know what the zoo stands for, they need to know what the theme of the zoo is, and they need to know how the zoo is supposed to operate and what's expected of them. And the only way you're going to do that is by matching your staff buildings for that environment. And so with the modern theme that we've got running throughout, it seemed fitting that this was the kind of administration area that you would have. And I've made the underneath completely working, so it now actually it's functional. It does what it needs to do. These are all vets and research centres and things. So I wanted to have that so that this building is actually used. It's not just there for the sake of it being there. And I wanted to keep the idea of the windows going because it's consistent with the main area. And I wanted to have these areas on the roof. Partly because it is actually hiding the stuff that sits underneath. This is the quarantine. So in terms of game function, it's serving a function to hide something. But actually, I kind of thought that there would be some kind of a rooftop terrace. There would be the ability to sit out in the sun or to have meetings out in the sun, or that's the kind of like modern workplace that this would have. And I wanted to carry on the vegetation as well. So I wanted this to be consistent. Again, because it's seen by the public, you can look down the road and you can see this bit. So it still has to be consistent. You can't just hide it away. And so I also put in this modern element as well with the sun dappler, and this would essentially be the staircase that would go up to the different floors. And I also continued the roof theme across as well, which I need to do some tidying up of, but I continued this idea of the square gaps coming through the roof, and again it dapples the sunlight coming into the actual offices. So I quite liked that idea. And then when you come down to the guest sightline or to the staff sightline, it's quite an impeding building, but it actually works quite well. It sort of sits, and it's very square, it's very clean, it's very modern, but it's functional. And then I did the same here with the theming, not theming, sorry, the landscape of the car park. I wanted it to be simple. This side, I wanted it to be a little bit overgrown. It also uses the terrain adjustment slightly, so it's got a bit of a hump here. And over the back, we've got the same as well. We've got this slightly raised terrain that creates a bit of depth into that sight line. We've got this fence that just separates the car park from the road, and I put in some street lights just to give it a bit of street lighting as you're going along. And so I quite like how it's turned out. I mean, the retaining wall carries on this way and then suddenly drops off, but it doesn't just disappear. It actually comes to an end properly, and it's scaled off properly. And then the smaller retaining wall comes along and picks up from where it's left off, and it doesn't block the view from any of the windows and anything. So yeah, it's quite good. We've also got this area out the front here that you'd imagine having picnic benches and stuff for the staff, but I haven't put those in because it's accessible from the road, so the guests would end up using it in the game functionality. I mean, I could make this a staff path and stop them from coming through, but then you lose this tarmac aspect, and you then have to start thinking about how you're going to cover off the pathway that you're trying to hide using padding and stuff. So I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to keep this tarmac consistent until you hit this backlot area. And there's nothing really else been done on the backlot area. I've just brought the consistency of the fencing round here. So I still need to do these buildings, and I haven't even touched the back end where we're looking at the garden just yet. That's going to be the next update. So I kind of changed my mind a little bit when I just started to lay out the administration building. It sort of just took off rather than doing the garden. So I thought, well, I'm just going to finish this and be done with it, so it's out of the way. So yeah, there we go. That's our administration building. So I think the next update is going to focus more around the garden and those final warehouses. So I shall see you on the flip side. Oh God, look how sad this looks. So a couple of hours later, and here we are with a very sorry looking backstage area. It's proper miserable. It's grey, it's bland, it's a backstage area. And it actually turned out so much better than I thought it was going to. At one point, I genuinely thought this wasn't going to actually end up being the way it was, and I'd have to scrap it and start again. But it's sort of come together quite nicely, and it's now looking all right. So just in the process of finishing this off, I finished this area here. I haven't done the whatever this is going to be. I don't know what this is going to be, and I haven't done the shop at the top here. I think I'm going to leave that to another episode. But I've done the garden area, and I've sort of cluttered it up a little bit. So as I said before, the garden area would be used to grow things like food that they like rather than buy it in, and potentially exotic plants for a botanical garden. And they would try and do as much as they can on site for the conservation part of it, rather than having to go across the world and taking it from the natural habitat. They would use samples and everything from stuff that they've already got. And so that's the purpose of this small little garden area here. It's not supposed to be detailed, it's not supposed to be overgrown or lush, it's just supposed to be a garden. And I think this is represented quite well. I decided to keep my really simplistic greenhouse as well. It's awful, but it's effective. It does what it needs to do, and I don't think it needs to do any more than that. So I sort of kept it there, but I put some lights inside, and I also just did a bit of growing inside as well. And I've just used a couple of weird different bushes and cactuses and whatever, just to represent things that are growing that you might have in a greenhouse. So yeah, I sort of like how that's turned out. It's all right. You imagine that you'd come into this greenhouse and harvest whatever it is that you're growing, and then off you go. I also decided to cover this with netting, and I'm in two minds as to whether I should bring the netting round, because the idea of the netting is it protects it from animals and wildlife, but wildlife isn't stupid; they're just going to go through the gap. So I don't know whether I should net this off. I wanted to keep it high enough for a person, but low enough for it to be protected. And I kind of figured that they would do it in rows, a bit like a farm would. And so that's the direction that I took it. And I also did some work to the back of the building. I realised that having it just as a blank back of a building actually didn't really work from what we were trying to achieve viewpoint wise. I figured that this admin building would have had some effort made to the back of it, even if it is just one long glass wall like this and it hasn't got the intricate details of the front, but they would still make an effort, but they wouldn't make an effort on this lower ground, because it sort of backs onto the garden and it backs onto other buildings, and it's like, well, okay, it's not worth it. So that's what I've done there. And then I've finished off this little warehouse thing. I used a clay roof. It's the closest I can get to a decent looking corrugated roof. I know that we've got the metal one that I've used on the back building, but yeah, so I've used the clay roof, and that's turned out quite nicely too. And then this this whole metal effect on the wall has worked out quite nicely. And then we've also got this one that's been finished off. So we've got the sun flare. Let me just. It's happened to us last time. Make it daytime again. There we go. So I finished this one off, and I wanted to make a bit of a rooftop area. But again, I didn't want to go into masses and masses of details. I just wanted it to be realistic enough to say, hey, I can climb up here. And I've just used the fence as a ladder for now. That's close enough. It does what it needs to do. Yeah, so I just wanted this to be a bit of a rooftop workspace area. So I've got a couple of air conditioning units and a couple of crates and whatever, just to clutter it up. But sort of gives the idea that might be a bit of a workspace area. And then I've just added some clutter around some places. So the bins I managed to get off of the workshop. I sort of gave in, and I don't normally use workshop items, but these were really too good. And it's Mr. Domez's bins from the street set. They just look so good, so perfect. And then I cluttered it up with the signs and whatever that's come through from just the normal pack. And then I wanted to add this step. I was out on a walk, and I noticed that this sort of thing happens quite a lot. That you have a step with a railing and a barrier, and I was like, actually, that's something that this area seems to be missing, and it just gives it just a little bit of height variation. It's not a lot in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't, it's not masses of height difference, but it just gives us sight line. It's not just a straight concrete thing anymore. So I quite like that. And I added the signs. They're not representative as to what's in the actual buildings. I just think it just looks a little bit, gives it a little bit of realism. Let's get rid of the UI again. It gives it just that little bit of realism that you're looking for, but it's still obviously Planet Zoo. And I use a Jeep just to represent a car. Kind of figured that there would be a Jeep that would run around the zoo at some point. Finished off the road markings, so they are just the arch shapes turned on their sides and sunk into the concrete, and then the actual concrete itself, that's just the concrete floor, the concrete roof, flat concrete roof, just lowered into the ground to make it look like it's there. And this is also functional, so people can come through. There's a path, and then what I did to stop the guests from coming through is turn this bit up here into an actual staff path. So it actually breaks that AI ability. But that's the only path that is. So staff can literally walk from the main building up to the zoo and into the bits that I would put here. So they now have that ability. I also finished off this car park area, put a couple of trees in just to change the sight line slightly, just to give it the impression that there's a world the other side. It's not just grass there. Finish off the fence, and I also did a little bit of touching up work on the office building. A few beams I noticed were missing, and I straightened up the roof a little bit. This was looking a bit sorry for itself. It wasn't overhanging the way that I thought it was going to. So I just fixed that slightly. But I'm now really pleased with how this has turned out. Look, it looks beautiful in the sun. If you just imagine that it's just a full glass fronted office, and it's dark now. But it gives you an idea of what it looks like in the dark. So you just get this idea of this beautifully fronted office building that would catch the sun all the time because it's south-facing. Yeah, I like how it's turned out. I like how the sun and the light reflects from the holes in the wall at the top here. And again, they're just art shapes, exactly the same as our entrance building is. Still it is. It's just art shapes mixed with the limestone walls and the metal cladding walls. And these are the New World grates that I also used over on the pens as well. And then these are just the beams, the glass panels. So there's no trickery. There's no like I've turned things upside down or the wrong way around or using the back sides of things. It's all stock items that you'd just be able to get from the normal building palette, just used in slightly different ways. And likewise, these fences, they're just pillars. It's just two pieces. It's literally just an upright pillar and a horizontal pillar. So yeah. Then I've done all of this area as well, and I do really like how this has turned out. Let me just make this day again. I don't know why. It's because it's 5 a.m. That'd be why. So yeah, I like how this road now comes through, and how you can still drive around, and it's still tarmac until the point where you get to the workspace area, and then it turns into concrete. And it's quite obviously like a rough, hard-wearing area. And I kind of figured that this area would be so much more cluttered and so much more filthy and so much more dirty than this would even give it justice. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to clutter it up. I kind of like how this is clean. I kind of like how it's quite tidy and quite well kept. But no, in real life, it would be an absolute state. There would be vehicles everywhere. There'd be bins everywhere. There'd be bits everywhere, and there would be not rubbish, but like clutter everywhere. But no, I just wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to keep it representative of an area, and to keep it quite clean. Haven't done anything with the pens. They are still exactly as they were. Just put the sign on. That's it. That's all I've done. So yeah, these are just your normal barrier fences. Chain link fences. These are the New World fences again. It's just a concrete pad on the bottom here with your normal doors, and then I've just used the air conditioning unit in the guttering to give it the idea that there's the pipe, just to give it that little bit of realism. I get completely that there would be a control panel somewhere. There would be air vac units at the top here. This might actually be enclosed, but I wanted it to be outside, just undercover. But yeah, I get that there'd be HVAC systems and all sorts going on, but I just know. It does what it needs to do, this area. I like it. And I'll leave the details for the ones that are far more capable and far more confident at doing it. So yeah, it's turned out quite nicely. Sightline wise, I still kept the same principles that I use in Planet Coaster in terms of sightlines. So even when it comes to this lady, are you a lady? Yes, you are. Are you? Yeah, you are. So this lady walking through, if like this is what she would see, and it's still quite it's still quite daunting. It's still quite high. It's still quite big. When you're looking at it as a player, looking down at it as a player, you don't really appreciate just how big these buildings are. They look kind of small, but it's not until you get down to peak level you think actually these are actually quite tall. Especially when you look at the windows, like you look at it and go, surely those windows should be like up here somewhere. It doesn't feel like they sit right, but they do, and as you can see, they're in line with the actual assets that the staff are using. So yeah, sightline was still important. I still wanted to keep some of the greenery, still wanted it to keep it a bit of a green space, but a working space. And the same principle is also true around here as well. I wanted this idea of the car park, and I wanted this idea of a bit more kept because more staff would use this area. It doesn't have to be a clinical area. It doesn't have to be kept clear because you're going to have lorries and trucks and whatever trundling through all the time. And I was thinking as well, exactly the same principles as Planet Coaster about the materials that you use. And I figured this area wouldn't have any effort put into it with decoration. It would just be concrete, it would be metal, it would be cladding, it would be grey, it would be very uninspiring. But I wanted to mix it up. So I mixed up this area. There's a metal panel next door to the concrete building, and it's next door to this concrete building, which is next door to a another metal cladding. And so yeah, it just gives slight variation as you're looking around. The building shapes are all completely randomly chosen, but they would have a purpose in real life. Like these buildings here would be taller because you might have giraffes in there, for example, and these buildings might be taller because you'd have elephants, and these buildings are wider because you'd have other animals, and so they all serve a purpose with the sizes and the shapes that they are. Yeah, so you would also possibly use this as some kind of storage area for the garden area, and so that's it looking down from the air, and then that's going to back onto whatever this is going to be, and then the shop, and just I sort of finished this sightline so I could say that I could box off the maintenance area. And so I did this little cabin here. And then this is the back of whatever the building is going to be. It's going to be a habitat. So I know it's definitely going to be a habitat, but I don't know what habitat is going to be. So I knew I definitely wanted a door. There's definitely going to be some kind of a pen. And I've let the grass that pokes through when you smooth out terrain, and it brings the grass back, I've let that poke through as if it's going to be overgrown, and they've let it overgrown. It's done by design, but I haven't put any kind of feeding things in there just yet because I don't know what animal it's going to be, but it will be an animal, and the building will extend up and out and hide the back of the building. So I finished it from the maintenance side and say actually this is kind of the access to whatever that exhibit would be. And then this is going to follow suit once I know what the exhibit's going to be and how far out it's going to go. Yeah, so that's sort of how it's looking there. And in terms of guest view, I was really conscious of this from the guest view because of the admin building and how tall that admin building is. I wanted it to be seen because like it is a beautiful build. Arguably, depends on your taste, a beautiful building to look at. So it is still relevant. It is still there. It's still on the sight line, sort of. I mean, it's hidden by the trees as you walk up the stairs, but it's visible there, and that's why you've got the black metal cladding roof wall here, and that sort of goes right across. So it's hiding the fact that it's like limestone and very concrete underneath. And I've also connected the road as well, so you can now actually walk down it and you can see from the road that building exists. And then there's the retaining wall, and there'd be something here as well that I'm gonna put in once I get rid of the facilities. But yeah, so you can see from the road that even there that building still exists. It's a thing. So you walk or drive or whatever, however you get down the road, and you get to this building here. You can look around, or you can go into the car park. I need to fill in this space. I don't know what to fill it in with yet. Or you can carry on walking, and you go past the actual building itself. So from this area, it looks so good. I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. It does look good. It's just the way that light comes down. It's so much better than I thought it was going to be. Anyway, it's going to get sad again because it's raining. So you carry on walking, and you still get this idea. And I don't know, I'm in two minds as to whether I bring this curve all the way down or not. I don't know, because it means that I've got to potentially do the same this side. So I don't know if I want to, or if I'm going to take these out and finish it at the fence. But anyway, So you then get to the fence. I think the fence is probably a bit too tall, but I wanted it to be tall to hide the backstage area, because you've got this monstrosity of a building, this office building, but then you've got these at the back. Anyway, so you carry on walking, and you end up in the car park area or the reception area for the maintenance zones, with some actual staff buildings that are in use here. And you carry on walking, you end up in your maintenance zone. Do just stepping through the concrete, and then you end up in the main area where you'd have lorries and stuff, and then that takes you then out back into the zoo. So that is everything I think for this episode. Yeah, I'm quite actually impressed with how this has turned out and how it looks functional. It looks like it should. So yeah, thank you for spurring me on. Like I say, if you want to know about any more episodes, then feel free to subscribe. Go ahead, you know what to do. Just smash a like, as they say, as the cool kids say. So yeah, I look forward to episode 3. I think I'm going to focus more on this area up here, get whatever this exhibit or habitat's going to be, get the shop done, get the second shop done. So that's going to be episode 3. But that for now is Roars and Claws, and that's the backstage area, all boxed off and done. I'll speak to you soon. Take care of yourselves.